What would you do if the two most important people in your life stabbed you right in your face? If all your past comes hunting your future, brace yourself for the story of David Cole, and what happened when a billionaire CEO invited his ex-wife to his wedding to humiliate her, but she came with twins and left him and the entire crowd speechless. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It's the best way to encourage creators. The music stopped. The happy chatter of the rich and powerful guests faded into nothing. All eyes turned to the grand entrance of the Cole Mansion's ballroom. Mouths dropped open. Glasses held by nervous hands shook and almost fell. The sheer weight of her presence at the wedding was not just overwhelming. It was dense, pure, and carried a perfume so expensive it could pay for more than half the wedding's budget. The vice president, Mrs. Annalise Ellison, murmured. She could not believe the force of the woman who had just walked in. No one could believe their eyes. They all thought they were seeing a ghost when their eyes met Caitlin Devil, the ex-wife of David Cole, the man who stood at the altar, moments away from taking his vows with another woman. It wasn't just her presence that was stunning. It was her entire being. Her transformation was breathtaking. Her red gown stood out amidst the sea of elegant but muted pastels like a single, perfect rose in a garden of white lilies. The fabric, a deep, blood-red silk, clung to her figure in a way that was both elegant and powerful, shimmering under the grand chandeliers brighter than any crystal. This was a new Caitlin. The Caitlin they remembered, the one David had thrown away, was a simple, quiet woman who would never have been able to afford such a gown. This dress wasn't just beautiful, it was a statement. It spoke of wealth, of power, of a comeback no one had ever anticipated. But her presence and her outfit were not the only things that sent a shockwave through the crowd. Another, far greater shock exploded in the silent hall. Clinging to each of her hands stood two small children, a boy and a girl. They looked to be about 3 years old, with wide, curious eyes taking in the massive room. They were identical to each other, with the same dark, curly hair and deep blue eyes. But what made every guest gasp, what made the blood drain from the groom's face, was their striking, undeniable resemblance to David Cole himself. David and his bride-to-be, Tasha, noticed her lasting presence even before the vows could be made. David's face, which had been beaming with smug satisfaction, flickered with genuine surprise. He saw Caitlin, the woman he had discarded, glowing with a confidence he had never seen before. He saw the dress, the poise, and then his eyes landed on the two children. A flicker of worry, of confusion, crossed his features before he instantly wiped it away, schooling his face into a mask of cold indifference. He gave the priest a subtle, dismissive wave, a silent command to wait. It was Tasha's voice that first broke the thick, suffocating silence of the crowd. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said, her voice dripping with venom. Her smile was villainous, sharp as a shard of glass, and carried a sense of pure, triumphant danger. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had fantasized about ever since she had successfully snatched David away from Caitlin. "Who would think that you would have the guts to show your face inside this mansion again?" she continued, her voice rising slightly. She began to circle Caitlin slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey, her own lavish white wedding gown sweeping the floor. She looked Caitlin up and down, her eyes filled with scorn, trying to dismiss her stunning appearance as nothing more than a cheap costume. "You've come back to the scene of the crime, have you?" David, seeing his cue, joined in the cruel game. He stepped down from the altar, a mocking smirk playing on his lips. "And she even brought 2 little church rats," he sneered, gesturing flippantly towards the children who clutched their mother's hands tighter. "Where did you find them, Kate? From the gutter, right? I always knew that's where you'd end up." They were both prepared for this moment. In fact, they had planned it from the very start. It was no coincidence that Caitlin was here. She hadn't shown up out of sheer luck or a desire for revenge. She was invited. An official, gold-embossed invitation had been sent by the bride and groom themselves, a final, cruel twist of a knife designed to humiliate her once and for all. Caitlin stood her ground, her expression unreadable. She let their words wash over her, her grip on her children's hands her only anchor. Then, she looked directly at Tasha, her voice calm and clear, ringing through the silent hall. "These things you call church rats are my children. And no, I see, Tasha, you're enjoying my leftovers." A collective gasp swept through the room. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Was Caitlin ever pregnant? I don't remember this at all. How can this happen? The timeline doesn't make sense. Look at the children. They look just like him. In that moment of rising panic and confusion, Tasha's carefully constructed composure finally snapped. She raised her hand, her fingers curled, in a swift motion that could only end in a slap. But Caitlin was ready. In a movement so fast, it was almost a blur, she caught Tasha's wrist midair, her grip like steel. "Don't you dare." Caitlin's voice was low, but it carried an authority that stunned everyone, most of all Tasha. Her reaction shocked the crowd more than Tasha's attempted violence. This was not the timid, easily broken Caitlin they knew. Tasha was the most shocked of all. She stared at her hand, caught firmly in Caitlin's grasp, her mind reeling. She didn't know this side of Caitlin. In all the years they had known each other, since they were children playing in the park, she had never once seen Caitlin be violent or even forcefully assertive. Even back in high school, it was Tasha who had always been the protector, the one who stood up to bullies for the shy, gentle Caitlin. And now, here she was, her hand suspended midair, completely overpowered. Tasha angrily yanked her hand back, rubbing her wrist. "You think you're different?" she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "Just because you changed your clothes and dressed up nice for once, you think you can come here and try to humiliate me? At my own wedding." Her words felt like bullets, fired in a desperate attempt to regain control. "Don't trouble yourself, love," David said smoothly, stepping forward and wrapping a proprietary arm around Tasha's waist, pulling her back to his side. "She's only jealous. She couldn't have this life, so she wants to ruin it for you." Caitlin took one long, slow breath, inhaling the air thick with expensive perfumes, jealousy, and pure, unadulterated anger. "Caitlin, look at me," Tasha spat, emboldened by David's touch. "I'm doing it. I'm living the life you once had before you crawled back to the streets where you belong. And I'm marrying him. Yes, him. David Cole. Your Prince Charming." David smiled, his hand still gripped tightly around her waist, a picture of smug victory. And for one small, almost imperceptible moment, Caitlin's firm armor cracked. A wave of memories, sharp and painful, washed over her. She remembered her own wedding day, the joy, the hope, the feeling of David slipping the ring on her finger. She remembered Tasha standing beside her as her maid of honor, smiling and crying tears of joy for her best friend. She remembered the first few years of her marriage, how it felt like something from a storybook, a perfect dream world. She remembered how David would wake up early to make her breakfast, even before she woke up, how he never allowed her to do a single chore, how she would wake up to little surprises on her pillow and fall asleep to him whispering stories in her ear. But then, just as vividly, she remembered how everything changed. It started slowly, with a subtle distancing. Then came the late-night texts he tried to hide, the unexplained business trips. Soon, he stopped coming home altogether. He began to look at her, as if she were trash, feeling open disgust at the mere sight of her. The fairy tale twisted into a nightmare. And the most heartbreaking part of it all was discovering that the woman behind the scenes, the one pulling the strings, was Tasha, her best friend since childhood, the one person she thought she could always trust. Then came the final night. He didn't even pack her bags. He just threw her out, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a shattered heart, only to invite her to this wedding 4 long years later for one final act of humiliation. But they were wrong. Oh, they were so wrong. Because this time, she was gonna fight back. "You know, honestly, I can't believe you would be dumb enough to walk through that door," Tasha said, her voice steadier now, her confidence returning. "What did you expect? Songs of praise? A welcome home gift? What? Oh, You have no idea what I have in store for you tonight." Caitlin remained silent. With the eyes of every single person in the room fixed on her, she moved gracefully to one of the nearest guest tables. She picked up a clean, empty wine glass and a bottle of expensive red wine. With a steady hand, she poured herself a glass, the dark liquid swirling. Her every movement was deliberate, calm, and utterly captivating. She took a small sip, then turned back to face the bride and groom. "Oh, Tasha, darling," Caitlin finally spoke, her voice now more confident, more composed, more definitive than ever before. "You're not the only one who has the entire night planned out." She placed the glass down on the table. "You see, I must applaud your effort to humiliate me today. Honestly, for years ago, I would have never seen it coming. But the truth is, you're the one who is leaving here humiliated." "What?" Tasha tried to interrupt, but Caitlin held up a single palm, silencing her instantly with the sheer force of her will. "You see, the thing is, even if you hadn't invited me to this ceremony," she said, letting the word hang in the air, "I was going to come anyway. After all, why would I miss my own husband's wedding?" The hall exploded. "What? I thought they divorced a long time ago. This is impossible. Did she just say husband?" Voices whispered and shouted across the room. David's face went pale. "What do you mean? I remember divorcing you 4 years back. I signed the papers myself," he stammered, his composure finally cracking. "Do you really?" Caitlin asked, a small, sad smile on her face. "Because according to the legal constitution of Italy, where we were married, a divorce is only considered final and complete if both the man and the woman collectively sign the divorce papers. Without a signature from both parties, the marriage cannot legally be said to have ended." She paused, letting her words sink in, her eyes boring into his. "And I don't remember signing." "What? You did." "I know you did," David responded, a note of pure panic in his voice. "Oh, David, dear, your memory seems to be failing you," Caitlin said, shaking her head slowly. "Remember? You signed your part, then you threw the papers in my face. You told me I had 12 hours to sign them and get out. But in those 12 hours, I didn't sign. You came back, assumed I had signed, and then you threw me out onto the street. You never even checked. And this leads me to believe that you never legally filed the divorce, and you certainly never bothered to open that file in the last 4 years." The crowd was going wild. Phones were out, cameras flashing everywhere. Journalists who had been invited to cover the society wedding of the year were now capturing a story 1,000 times bigger. The scene was becoming utterly chaotic. Then, Caitlin calmly reached into her elegant designer handbag. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and, with a flick of her wrist, tossed it onto the floor at Tasha's feet. It was her copy of the divorce agreement. And there, on the line designated for her signature, the space was perfectly, incriminatingly blank. Now, everyone truly believed her. The wedding of David Cole and Tasha was not happening because David Cole was still married. To Caitlin, the story was already taking a wild turn. But what Caitlin was about to reveal next would not only destroy a wedding, but an entire empire. If you're loving this drama, make sure to subscribe to Black Nation, because what happens next is something you would never, ever expect. We are not just a community, but a family, a nation, and a movement. We are Black Nation. "You see, it's all there," Caitlin said, gesturing to the paper on the floor. "But don't worry, darling," she said, her eyes finding Tasha's in the stunned crowd. "I don't want to steal your man away from you. You can have him. I only want one thing." She turned her gaze back to David, her expression hardening. Child support. Child support." A collective gasp, louder than all the previous ones, rolled through the air like a physical wave. Now everything was beginning to make a terrifying amount of sense. The twin children still standing quietly by her side. Their uncanny, shocking resemblance to David. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture far more scandalous than anyone could have imagined. "What childish nonsense," David blurted out, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. "You were never pregnant for me. David, now I'm beginning to think you've lost your memory alongside your sense of judgment," Caitlin said, her voice quivering with long-suppressed pain. Remember 4 years ago, just before you threw me out? I told you I was pregnant. And you told me to terminate the pregnancy. All because of your mistress, she said, glancing at Tasha. You said a child would complicate things. We argued. We fought for days over this, but you didn't want any kids with me. And so, like a good wife, I obeyed your wishes. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, tears welled in her eyes. But you see, when I went to the clinic, they did an ultrasound, and I saw them. I saw twins. 2 heartbeats instead of 1. I couldn't do it. So I decided to keep my babies. How could you be pregnant for 9 months and I wouldn't notice? David demanded, grasping at straws. You should ask yourself that. Caitlin shot back, her voice rising with emotion. How didn't you notice when I told you I was going to live with my mom for a while to clear my head? You were relieved. Not once did you visit. Not once did you call to check on me. For 7 whole months, I stayed there, waiting, hoping you would come to your senses, that you would meet me and change your mind. But you never did. My mom took care of me. I gave birth to our children, and you didn't even for once notice I was gone. Caitlin finally broke, covering her face as sobs racked her body. The act was over. This was raw, real pain. This was it. The entire atmosphere in the grand hall turned sober. The anger and shock were replaced by a heavy sadness. Tears filled the eyes of most of the guests present. Even the unflappable Mrs. Annalise couldn't hold herself back, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Across the room, Jerry's son, a tough-as-nails tech billionaire, couldn't stop a single tear that traced its way down his face. And in that heavy, emotional moment, a shrill voice cut through the quiet. Lies. Lies. All lies. It can't possibly be true. It was Tasha, her face pale and her eyes wild with desperation. Caitlin took a deep breath, wiping her tears away as if preparing for the final round. She once again reached into her purse and brought out another set of papers. This time, they were official documents from a medical lab. She held them up for all to see. They were DNA results. All tested. All confirmed. David Cole was, with 99.9% certainty, the biological father. No, it can't be, David whispered, the paper seeming to suck all the air from his lungs. He stumbled backward, his legs giving out from under him. You want to know why I left the divorce papers and signed all this time? Caitlin said, her voice now steady again, imbued with a sad strength. Because I had hope. Hope that you would one day return to your senses. Hope that one day you would remember the man you used to be and come back to me, to our family. But now, I realize I was just fooling myself. It took me 4 years, but I finally understand. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and resolve. I have already sued you for child support. She then raised her voice, calling out over the murmuring crowd. Mr. Whitmore, you can come out now. Every head in the room turned towards the grand entrance. A young, sharply dressed black man made his way into the already chaotic arena, a leather briefcase in his hand. He walked with an air of calm professionalism, unfazed by the drama unfolding around him. Most of the high-profile guests knew him immediately. He was Johnson Whitmore, one of the best and most renowned lawyers in the entire country. He walked straight to David, who was still staring blankly into space. Mr. Whitmore opened his briefcase and handed over a thick stack of documents. What is this? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Cole, Mr. Whitmore explained in a clear, measured tone, my client over here, Ms. Caitlin Devil, has sued you for civil damages related to the psychological trauma, neglect, and emotional distress she went through during her pregnancy and in raising your children alone up until now. The damages will be paid in the sum of $50 million. What? That's insane. That's half of my entire company's worth. David protested, finally jolting back to reality. My apologies, sir, Mr. Whitmore replied in a way that wasn't sorry. The court will decide. I will see you in court on July 1st. With a polite nod, the lawyer turned and slowly took his leave, just as calmly as he had come. David couldn't hold himself together anymore. A strangled cry escaped his lips, and he fell heavily onto a nearby chair, burdened by the immense weight of what had just happened. His world had crumbled in less than 30 minutes. And Tasha? She lost all control. She launched herself at Caitlin, screaming, "You can't do this. You can't just come in here and take half of his company like that, plus child support. No, you can't." Caitlin stood tall, uplifting her spirit from the depths of her pain. She looked the hysterical bride in the eye and said two simple, powerful words. "Watch me." That was it. She reached down and took the hands of her two children, who had watched the entire scene with wide, confused eyes. As she was about to exit, she paused. She turned back, picked up a pen from a guest book table, and strode over to where the unsigned divorce paper lay on the floor. She picked it up. "Oh, lest I forget," she said, her voice ringing with finality. She signed her name with a swift, decisive flourish and then tossed the now-completed document onto David's lap. "Now you can have him." She turned and walked out of the room with the same powerful aura she had entered with. As she took her steps, cameras flashed like lightning. And then, something remarkable happened. People began to clap. It started with Mrs. Annalise, who couldn't control her emotions, and it spread through the room. It was a release of tension, an expression of admiration for a woman who had reclaimed her power. The crowd felt they had just been taught the greatest lesson of their lives, that no matter what happens, loyalty is the core of every relationship. And when it is broken, chaos will reveal itself. And in the days that followed, Caitlin won. She won all the charges she pressed against David. She was awarded the $50 million in damages, and he was placed on a monthly child support plan of $5,000. David's life slowly crumbled to dust. Tasha, seeing that the money and status were gone, left him within a week. His company, crippled by the huge lawsuit payout and the public scandal, went bankrupt. Within a year, he couldn't even meet his child support payments. Meanwhile, Caitlin's story went viral on the internet. Posts, comments, and articles celebrated her strength. People were inspired by her story, others praised her courage, and some even took a liking to her, one of whom, a kind and successful architect who had been a guest at the wedding, later developed feelings for her. Feelings that blossomed into love and eventually marriage. And that family is what happens when bonds built over years get broken by simple, selfish desires. A reminder that strength often comes from the deepest pain. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow for more heart-melting stories like this. It's honestly the best way to support Creator. We are Black Nation, not just a community, but a family, a nation, and a movement. We are Black Nation.